You shake hands to prove you're unarmed. You wear a ring on this finger because ancient Romans thought it was wired directly to your heart. You've been doing 7 things your entire life without ever knowing why. Chapter 1. Your handshake started as a way to prove you weren't about to kill someone. The gesture likely began as a way to show an approaching stranger that your right hand was empty, holding no weapon, which meant peaceful intentions rather than an ambush. Evidence of this exact gesture appears in Assyrian stone reliefs dating back to the 9th century BCE, showing kings clasping hands to seal agreements between rival kingdoms. The ancient Greeks and Romans later formalized the handshake as a symbol of trust and mutual respect between equals, often carving the gesture into tombstones and coins to represent loyalty even after death. Some historians even believe the up-and-down shaking motion itself may have originally been designed to dislodge any small blade hidden up a sleeve, a final safety check built directly into the greeting. What started as a battlefield safety check slowly became the default greeting for almost every business meeting, introduction, and goodbye on the planet, stripped entirely of its original life-or-death context. Chapter 2. Your wedding ring finger was chosen because of a belief about your bloodstream. Ancient Egyptians and later the Romans who adopted the tradition believed in something called the vena amoris, or vein of love, a vein they thought ran in an unbroken line from the 4th finger of the left hand straight to the heart. By placing a ring on that specific finger, a couple was symbolically binding their 2 hearts together forever, creating a physical, permanent connection sealed in metal. Modern anatomy has since confirmed there's no vein connecting that finger to the heart any more directly than any other finger on the hand, and the circulatory system simply doesn't work that way at all. But by the time this was understood, the tradition had already spread too widely across cultures and centuries to meaningfully change. Western wedding customs simply kept the placement, turning what was originally an anatomical myth into one of the most recognizable and universally understood symbols of romantic commitment in the entire world.
Chapter 3. You cover your mouth when you yawn because ancient people feared losing their soul. In many ancient cultures, the human soul was believed to live inside the breath itself, making every single yawn a genuinely dangerous moment rather than a simple biological reflex. A wide open mouth wasn't just impolite, it was a real opening. Your soul could slip out unnoticed during the yawn, or evil spirits wandering nearby could slip in through the same gap and take up residence inside you. Covering the mouth during a yawn was originally a protective gesture, not a polite one, meant to physically block that exchange from happening in either direction. Some cultures even developed the habit of making a small sign of the cross over the mouth alongside the covering gesture, layering extra spiritual protection onto an already sacred moment. The politeness explanation came centuries later, long after most people had forgotten the original supernatural reasoning behind the gesture entirely. Chapter 4. You knock on wood because ancient Europeans believed trees were alive with spirits. Slavic, Germanic, and Celtic peoples of antiquity believed the trees, especially old or sacred ones, were inhabited by protective guardian spirits watching over the surrounding land. Touching or knocking on wood was a way of physically reaching out to those spirits, either to ask for their protection immediately after saying something hopeful out loud, or to thank them in advance for good fortune yet to come. The fear was that speaking of good luck too openly might attract the attention of darker forces listening nearby, jealous of happiness they hadn't earned, and the wood itself acted as a kind of physical shield against that attention. The specific tree species mattered too in some traditions, with oak trees in particular considered especially powerful protectors due to their size, age, and association with thunder gods. Chapter 5. You toss coins into fountains because ancient Romans paid their water gods. This casual tourist habit traces directly back to ancient Rome, where people would throw coins into sacred pools, springs, and wells, believed to be home to water deities capable of granting wishes or healing the sick who bathed there. The coin itself functioned as a small offering, a form of payment made directly to the god in exchange for good fortune, safe travel, or a specific favor being requested. Roman engineers even built specific basins into public fountains, partly to collect these offerings, effectively designing religious donation boxes directly into the city's water infrastructure. Archaeologists have recovered thousands of ancient coins from wells and springs across the former Roman Empire, confirming just how widespread and genuinely sincere the practice once was. Every wish made into a modern fountain today is technically a direct, if entirely unknowing, continuation of a 2,000-year-old religious transaction with a water spirit.
Chapter 6. You keep your elbows off the table because of a 400-year-old etiquette book. A 1609 English Guide to Manners specifically instructed readers not to put, in its own words, thine elbows upon the table, one of the earliest written versions of a rule still taught to children in almost identical form today. At the time, dining tables were often shared benches packed tightly with other diners, meaning elbows spread wide could easily jab a neighbor, knock over a candle, or destabilize the entire table setting during a meal. The rule had a genuinely practical origin rooted in medieval and early modern seating arrangements, where personal space at the table was a real physical constraint rather than a social preference. It simply outlived the crowded benches that made it necessary in the first place, surviving purely as an inherited marker of good manners long after the original problem disappeared. Chapter 7. You stay silent when someone spills something because Victorians considered it ruder to mention it. On formal Victorian dinner parties, if a guest dropped a piece of cutlery, spilled wine across the tablecloth, or even shattered a glass outright, etiquette experts of the era insisted the only correct response was to say absolutely nothing at all. Drawing attention to the accident, even through a well-meaning apology from the guests themselves, was considered a far greater social failure than the accident had been itself. Soft-footed servants were trained to quietly clean up the mess while conversation continued exactly as if nothing had happened, restoring order without a single word being exchanged about it. That instinct to politely ignore small accidents in front of others has quietly survived for well over a century, long after the servants who made the silence possible disappeared from most dining rooms entirely. 7 habits, 7 forgotten reasons, and you've probably done at least one of them today without thinking twice. If this kind of stuff messes with your head, that's exactly what Curiosketchy is about. Subscribe if you want more of it, and drop a comment with the next thing you want explained.